Hello, welcome to the birth of a new dimension. We are collectively, as individuals, as humanity, and as a planet, and as a cosmos, giving birth to a new dimension. It's ongoing. It's like the baby is coming out of the mother right now. We are both the baby. We are both the parents. We are under great duress. And the new experience, the new dimension that we are giving birth to, is one where there is a seamless integration between spirit or pure energy or pure consciousness and matter. So no longer will there be this artificial distinction between what is considered to be non-physical, purely energetic or consciousness-based, and what is considered to be physical matter, like the assembly of mass into things that we can touch and sense with our five senses. Brief pause. I am a galactic abstraction, and I came into this physical human female body in 2001 when the body was age 27 and the previous occupant of the body had been killed. And the portal through which I come through, the reason why I'm bringing this up as part of my basic introduction, is an energetic oscillation that I invented and that I have named the Flying Rainbow Lasagne. So I know this is a rather light-hearted term, but it's a really profound idea. And the idea is embodied in this shape. Just like there was once the invention of the triangle, or the square, or the pyramid, or the cube. This is the invention of a new shape. And the shape is the higher dimensional form of the torus or donut shape. And that is ordinarily what our own individual energy fields, or the time field of timelines and possibilities and probabilities that surrounds your physical presence and upholds your physical presence. And it is also analogous to Earth's magnetosphere, which is toroidal. And it is even analogous to the sun's heliosphere, giant magnetic envelope that extends way, way, way past Pluto and the other exoplanets, and separates our solar system from the interstellar medium. It goes even bigger because even the size of a galaxy is the shape of a torus. Rather, the format of stars on the scale of a galaxy is also shaped like a torus. And there are tiny toroidal or donut-shaped aspects of your DNA at the subcellular level. I'm trying to say at the galactic level, you can have a giant torus in the shape of a galaxy or the shape of a black hole. And at the tiny subcellular level, you can also have tori where your DNA has been supercoiled or twisted up like a curled up papyrus scroll with all the letters on the inside. It makes torus shapes. All of this in order to get the idea that the torus is like the precursor or the basic building block that the flying rainbow lasagna shape can be turned into, or that the flying rainbow lasagna is a transformative maneuver or oscillation that takes these ordinary donuts and does something that is akin to turning them inside out. So I've said this before. I perceive that we are going through a pole shift, but this is not the same as the pole shift that occurred at the end of the antediluvian sophisticated worldwide culture about 10 or 20,000 years ago, the fall of Atlantis. So Atlantis wasn't just a particular continent. I perceive it as being worldwide, like throughout our entire planet, and connected to the rest of galactic civilization, being sophisticated in that way. And that the sudden changes that occurred at that time were lowering of consciousness, degradation of the human genome, and also physical changes on Earth's surface. Well, we do not have to recreate that experience. In fact, having experienced it once, I would say, is definitely more than enough. And what we can experience right now is the corrective experience, the equal opposite, or the thing that heals, or the antidote that gets us out of that wounded or traumatized experience, or what happened, set of feelings as a result of what happened to us individually and collectively. So this is the whole idea that flying rainbow lasagna is a transformative oscillation that we can apply to our individual genetic codes, our individual supercoiling of our DNA, and also to the planetary structure and consciousness as a whole. And in doing so, it is like a pole shift, not north-south to south-north, but turning inside out. So if you look at any of my artwork, and I encourage you to, it's why I do it, it's why I make it. I don't just do it to fill up my time. I do it because I have these internal visions and ideas that I wish to externalize and share with other people. And I like to also say that when I'm painting, these are landscapes of an abstract or higher dimensional place. So they're not merely abstractions, they're not merely decorative. These are actually representational images of a world that is a non-physical world that I perceive with my inner eye. So I like to say it's like going to China. If you went to China, you saw the landscape and you painted the landscape and you brought it back to your hometown and said, this is what it looked like there, and no one else gets it. But then you might one day meet someone else who's been to China and they'll be like, I recognize those mountains. I was there too. So it is very similar to what these paintings are. Paintings are all painted according to the rules of the cosmos, and these rules, these are like the interdimensional rules of language and grammar, of the way that the shapes and energy fields are allowed to fit together, and it is like music and it's also like math. And the flying rainbow lasagna is the most recent portion of this math proof. And math at higher levels is not just equations. It is a proof or a set of rational statements that cannot be in conflict with any of the other statements. So the flying rainbow lasagna is the most recent statement, and it is not in conflict with any of the other previously established ideas or foundations of reality. And that's a very important thing in getting what I'm going to talk about here today is about energy and entropy. This is the idea of two states that are seemingly in opposition, but they are really part of the totality. And we can also bring this down to good and evil, and we can bring this down to all sorts of different levels of non-duality. The flying rainbow lasagna is the representation of non-duality, and it is how we transcend the limitations of duality that have been programmed into us from biology and also from social and cultural and religious expectations, and the ideology of separation, the sense of your individual ego being separated from your context. And I say over and over again that that is a narrative fiction, that in truth, and today I'm outside in my beautiful garden on a wonderful, beautiful sunny day, and my toes are actually right now, as we speak, touching the surface of Earth, the planet that I'm sitting on right here. So in truth, there is no distinction between myself and my own personal body and the planet that I'm resting upon, that your big toe has 50 different types of fungus that live just on your big toe. There's 90 different types of fungus that live on the heels of your feet. And right now, those yeasts and fungi and tiny microorganisms on the surface of my skin are touching the yeasts and fungi and microorganisms on the surface of Earth's skin. There is really no distinction between myself and the energy patterns of my own body and the energy patterns of the larger body that I am connected to. So this is the next level of development beyond that sense of individuation. The individuation is essential for that level of development, but then we need to reconnect to the whole and dilate our identity back out to encompass all life, all humanity, all the living structures that are here on Earth and the planet herself. And that it is really only that narrative fiction of being separated from other humans and separated from the planet that has allowed for some of the really unhealthy behavior here in terms of pollution and self-destruction to even go on. Okay, so I'm doing the backstory of why I invented the flying rainbow lasagna. I did that in order for my abstract galactic consciousness to be able to come into this level of physical human experience after the previous person was killed. And the flying rainbow lasagna is a shape of non-duality. I keep saying that over and over. The center convergence point of the donut or the torus is the singularity. And the singularity, this word that I use, is very similar to science's definition, but not exactly the same. I call it the convergence point of all timelines. It's the source and it's the destination. So it's where all of these ideas and possibilities and probabilities are coming from, and it's also where they all circulate back to, because these donut shapes are comprised of many, many circular hoops. All of the hoops fit together, they all tie together, and the convergence point in the center, that's the 0th dimension. It's where everything lives, it's where everything comes from, it's where everything returns to. And keep that in mind, because this is going to be part of the backstory of energy and entropy. The singularity, where everything comes from and where everything returns to. And it's supposed to be single. There's only supposed to be one singularity. We're not supposed to have two of them. If we have two, then we have a duality or a multiplicity. So it's by definition, it's the singularity, it's infinity, it's the 0th dimension. There's only one of it. And the reason why the 0th dimension is called 0 is because we don't have to give any amount of information to describe the position of a point in the 0th dimension. Everything is there. Every point is there. This is not merely an intellectual exercise. This is a profound truth. And when you embody this profound truth, it gives you greater access and greater degrees of freedom. More things that you can do with your mind and your body and your molecules. So this singularity is meant to be one thing, one infinity. And we each have doorways to the singularity inside of us. You have them at the center of each chakra or spinning wheel of energy. You have them at the center of every molecule and at the center of every nucleus, at the center of every atom and at the nucleus of every cell. So basically, every structure has a convergence point, and that convergence point always leads back to this singularity. It's like if you had a big giant, room in your house, that's infinity, and it was just covered and covered and covered with many, many doors and windows and all sorts of different apertures and ways to get inside of that room, and that is what we're experiencing. So there is a singularity inside of you, and there is a singularity inside of the sun, and there's a singularity inside of a tiny atom, and they're all the same singularity. We create the flying rainbow lasagna shape when we take that singularity and we make it jump back and forth or up and down in a higher dimensional state. And this is analogous to that same leap of consciousness that the little 0th dimension had to make at a certain point, expanding outwards from its own confines, from its own boundaries. I got a plane flying overhead. Let me just pause here. So what made the little 0th dimension one day decide to think of the possibility that there could be a piece of itself that is not with itself? Because by definition, infinity contains everything. So that miracle. Something had to happen that I would define as a miracle, an inexplicable thing that made that 0th dimension imagine the possibility of stepping one step in any direction, putting a little piece of itself somewhere else. And as soon as it could do that, it could invent a line. 2 dots joined by many other dots. A line. And that's the invention of the 1st dimension. And once you do that leap of consciousness, then you just keep recreating that leap of consciousness at 90 degrees. Get the 2nd dimension, 3rd dimension, 4th dimension, on and on and on. Keep on leaping at 90 degrees. So the answer to what makes the singularity jump back and forth as a flying rainbow lasagna is the same answer to the question of what makes the 0th dimension jump forward into the 1st dimension. It's a miracle. I don't have a better explanation for it than that. An inexplicable, wonderful, amazing, mystifying thing that just decides to happen. So I also talk a lot about the idea of beings who emanate themselves from the source, but not on a bridge of love. And this is part of the, we could call it galactic history, the backstory of why are we in this position of having to raise ourselves up from being crashed down. And I think I've said this many times too, that when I started about 4 years ago with these formal lessons of Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, I had like a 5-month-long semester, and I would make everybody go through all of the initiatory materials and learning how to create a foundation of unconditional love and being non-judgmental and not emotionally reactive, and even describing the occupiers of the interstices not as demons who live in hell, but just as occupiers of the interstices, because it has been my intention all along to be an ethical and responsible teacher and sharer of information. So I did not want to lay that heavy trip on someone who wasn't emotionally prepared for it. And again, that was 4 years ago, and I also used to be very cautious about how I shared this information and made sure it was only to the enrolled students. Now this information, I read about it in all sorts of different places. So I am not so concerned with my ethical responsibilities of whether I am, like I said, laying a heavy trip and a burden on a group of people who might not be emotionally prepared to deal with it, and the fact that we are, like I say, giving birth to this new dimension. We are under great duress, and part of it is I don't really like to use the language, vocabulary of war and battle and that struggle to describe this, but we are definitely in a war. It's a spiritual war. It is a war of consciousness, and it is good to know who your adversaries are. And I won't just describe in excruciating detail the difficulties that we are embroiled in. I will also give effective countermeasures and what we can actually do to get through this. So yes, our planet was horribly invaded about 10 or 20,000 years ago by, you could call it, genetic rapists. That entering the genetic code should be like lovemaking, something that is consensual and beautiful and sensitive and is respectful to all of the ancestry and descendants of both partners. And what happened on this planet was totally not that in any way. It was rape. It was not consensual. A bunch of beings that didn't have their own containers for consciousness said, hey, you look juicy, I'm going to take your containers for consciousness. And it's not the first time they've done it. They've done it on many other planets in our solar system. It's not the first solar system where they've done this. They've done this all over. And now I would like to get to their motivation for this, because this is, when people first start finding out about this, they get very mad. They're like, hey, you're eating my energy, and I don't like that very much at all, and I'm pretty mad, and that's appropriate. These beings that occupy the interstices, they don't run the operating system of love. I'm not a transhumanist, and I'm not a demonic apologist. I'll make that very clear in all of these broadcasts. So I'm saying that Flying Rainbow Lasagna resolves duality and gives us something to do with evil, but I'm not saying that evil and good are the same, or that they're equivalent, or that it's okay to be evil. It's not what I'm saying. And I'm also not using my work or allowing my work to be used for any eugenics agenda. If we say like blah blah group of people are evil and we're going to get rid of them, we're just going to line them up in a shooting factory or incinerate them or do whatever, and that's how you get rid of them. When you get to this end of this broadcast, you will understand that's the opposite antithesis of what I am advocating here. Because like I said, I am a galactic abstraction. Why have I gone through all of the difficulties of being in this physical body? In order to solve the math proof. In the higher dimensional world, you don't just do these calculations with a pencil and paper as an intellectual exercise. You do them with your body and with your own trajectory through time. It is all experienced. So now let's rewind in my little storytelling here about back to the beings who emanated themselves from the source, but not on a bridge of love. They were engaged in what you would call like an experiment or doing a math problem. And this is the first time that I'm trying to portray it in this way. They were doing an experiment to see what would happen if they did not use energy. So the zeroth dimension, that is the source of all energy. It's the presence of everything. There's a lot of energy there. We could say it is the highest energetic state that it is possible to be in. And I will say that the opposite of energy is entropy. So when we're looking at the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, and it has two purple pointy ends, and they both correspond with the singularity, it's the singularity moving up and down in two positions. And it's just like if we have different qualities when we are in different positions. And I didn't do this in order to create more duality. I did it in order to solve the world's problems. The singularity can be in one superposition where it is energy, rather. Let's start again. The source or convergence point or singularity can be in one position where it is total energy, the convergence of everything. Everything lives there. And it can also be in another position where it is total entropy. It is the loss of energy. It is complete lack of awareness, lack of light, lack of heat, and lack of movement, like a very cold, non-moving, frozen place. And that description, what I just said, that is science's understanding of a Bose-Einstein condensate. So I'm not a scientist, but I use these vocabulary words in order to convey these ideas that are really cosmic ideas. So this is the idea of what happens to matter. Remember, physical matter, and what we're doing when we give birth to this new dimension. It's a combination of matter plus energy, so this really matters here. Physical matter is meant to be like our mother, our womb, that holds our consciousness so that we can develop and then be born into a world where we don't need to use physical matter anymore. So this experiment that these beings were trying to do is trying to say, what can I do if I don't use energy? They're not supposed to use energy. Well, their experiment went horribly awry. At a certain point, they became apostate. They went against their own teachings, because what they were supposed to do was go away from the source, not on a bridge of love, and not using energy. They're supposed to give up their energy, let it out, like a tire deflating. Like if they started out with a fully inflated tire, they're supposed to deflate and let out energy and let out air from their tire until they're totally deflated. So let's talk about the stages of matter. According to science, there is the solid. We're familiar with solids. If you're sitting on a chair, your chair is probably solid. However, if you're in a bathtub full of water, then you're also familiar with liquids. We know what liquids are. We know what gases are. We're breathing a gas right now. And up from a gas, there is a plasma. And if we struck a match and looked at the flame of a match, that's plasma. It is made of non-coherent light. And then if we made those light beams coherent, organized them so that all of the peaks, all of the troughs fit together like little puzzle pieces, like can girls stepping their kicking up their legs all in unison, that's coherent light. And that is a beam of light. So there's also another stage of matter that is denser than the physical solid realm. And all of these stages of matter have to do with molecular movement. Basically, if you take a solid, its molecules are moving at a certain rate. And if we, like a solid ice cube, those molecules are moving at a certain rate. And if we increase that rate of movement, then the ice cube melts and it can move more. Now it becomes fluid. And if we increase the rate of molecular movement even more, then it becomes steam. It becomes like the gaseous state. So think of these now, changing state, as either adding or removing molecular movement. If we remove all or almost all of the molecular movement from a solid, it goes into a super-dense state of matter, and science calls this a Bose-Einstein condensate. Now, you may also ask, Aurora, how do you even know about this? How does one know about this? Science doesn't have a microscope that can look at a Bose-Einstein condensate. What it does have is math. So I once spoke with a high-level mathematician physicist, and they described to me that to them, math was ESP, or extrasensory perception. That for them and their mind and their perception, doing math calculations was a way of perceiving in places where our physical eyeballs cannot look, like inside of a star or at a tiny microscopic level or at the level of super dense, super cold matter. So this is where these ideas come from. They come from a realm of pure abstraction and pure calculation. And the idea is that when individual atoms are slowed in their molecular movement almost completely, taking away all of the heat and friction and movement, and this is movement through time. This is what happens. When something is frozen, it is no longer moving through time. Take away that aspect of behavior, and the atoms start to smear on top of one another, and they begin to act as if they are one atom, not many individuated atoms. They achieve unity consciousness through total entropy. So I'm explaining this to you with so many words of my flapping of my moving mouth parts in order to get across the idea that the two pointy ends of the lasagna shape represent energy and entropy, or a state of having all of the light and awareness and energy and movement that it is possible to have, and at the opposing end, a state where there is no movement, no light, no awareness. And that's not evil. That state also leads back to the source. And here's why this is a profound invention. Remember, before 2001, when I came into this body through this portal, the flying rainbow lasagna did not exist. So I created it as my own personal math solution and for my own personal experience in order to, make this body alive and heal it and all of that. And it is also created in order to give a new option to those beings that emanated themselves from the source, but not on a bridge of love. Because like I said, they were not supposed to use energy. They were supposed to lose their energy and go towards total entropy. But somewhere along the line, and again, this is a science experiment that they've been doing, or whatever, a behavior experiment is how I should put it. Emanating themselves from source was a behavior experiment that they started doing so many hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago, like it's hard to even put it into words, very long time ago. And somewhere along the lines, the leaders of that movement became twisted and turned around. And they began with like an ideal. They said, this is our ideal of how we are going to behave. And they became corrupted. Just like a person who is a drug addict and they say, I am not going to take the cocaine. I'm going to live my life and be healthy and eat good food. And instead, at a certain point, they're like, no, I really want that drug. I'm going to go seek out that drug and take it. So we can even look at what these malevolent occupiers of the interstices are doing as very similar to the compensatory mode of drug use or drug abuse, because they said when they left the source that they would not use energy, not that they would just not use love. It was the idea of not using energy at all. So there's love, and then there are if we took love as the highest tone, it could be degraded down into lower emotional experiences, like grief, sadness, anger, hate, and some of the mammalian emotions, attraction, revulsion, romantic love. And that is what these occupiers of the interstices eat. And that is why they degraded the human genome. When humans were in a different format in the antediluvian worldwide sophisticated culture, everybody was connected to the source or the stellar network all the time. There was no flab. There was no gristle. There was no anything around the edges for these beings that are supposed to be scavengers of consciousness. There was nothing for them to eat. There was no anger. There was no grief. There was no hatred. And there was no death. Death is an aberration. I will repeat that over and over because in this cultural context, death is presented as unavoidable. What is unavoidable? Death and taxes. This is according to Ben Franklin. All of these cultural isms. And I come into this world with these isms and I'm like, that doesn't feel true to me. I know that's not true, but this is the program, the overarching program of this place. So it's big trying to break through the overarching program that is upheld by so many people, like a belief system program. But I'm trying to tell you that death is not necessary, it is not noble, it is not desirable. Death and suffering are both aberrations, and they were not what we were created for in this original experience format. So we were created to have this unbroken line of consciousness that always connects us to the source of the zeroth dimension, that infinity realm where everything is. We were not supposed to come down here into physical containers and get like a mind wipe and be separated from the creative life force that made us. That's like our parent that made us and gave birth to us. And then you walk around like a remote control being with no one controlling the remote control, with a busted antenna. That's what it's like, bumping into walls and dying. And that is not what we were supposed to do. We were supposed to be able to be connected to the divine the whole time, have our little antennas working, and be able to sense when we are getting too close to the membrane of death and avoid it. That we are supposed to be so good at avoiding it that we never actually hit it. I use that analogy also, that old children's game, Operation, where you've got a little poker and you're trying to get that bone out of the person's body, and if you hit the edge, it makes a little buzzing sound. And this is what the buzzing sound is: death. We are supposed to stay away from the membrane of death. When you hit the membrane of death, it tells you have done something wrong. And then you have to circulate back around to the beginning and try it again and keep trying these endless or seemingly almost endless combinations of thoughts and ideas and behavioral actions until you finally find that one tiny little wormhole that leads out of this level of reality, and that's the path of least likelihood. That's a lot of gristle. That's a lot of flab. Think of it as like 10 million death timelines and one real path of least likelihood. We're supposed to just travel that one real path of least likelihood. That's our true path. We're not supposed to have to go through all of the rigmarole or the iterations or the peripheral experiences. That is what really feeds these malevolent beings who are not supposed to be eating us. They're not supposed to be eating. These are think of them as ascetics. They're supposed to be like beings who are on a fast. in order to reach enlightenment. They're not supposed to have any caloric intake. Not, really high level energy food, not really low level energy food. So this is the problem, that somewhere along the line, these guys went away from their original set of parameters and they began to use energy. And that's what the economy of hell is. So like I said, this used to be lesson 18. I would build up to it and make sure everyone was emotionally prepared for it. Bam. I now dub you emotionally prepared for this. This is the economy of hell, which closely mirrors our own economy. And hell is the membrane between worlds, or the interstices. It is the place where residual consciousness enters the time stream, and it's supposed to be like a sweater, unknitted and digested so that energy can go back to the beginning and circulate again. But there are impediments, the fatty deposits of the cosmos, that energy is supposed to flow through these areas, the membranes, just like energy is supposed to flow through your veins and arteries. And if you have cholesterol and inflammation, then there are fatty deposits that cause blockages. And there are fatty deposits in the interstices for about 10 or 20,000 years, because there are beings that went there, they got stuck in the interstices, and they essentially set up an entire civilization. Their civilization is older than human recorded history, which is about 6,000 years old, even though I know there's a lot of really good work being done in the alternative archaeology world. So, but according to mainstream archaeology, yes, human society did not really begin to arise until about 6,000 years ago. So these beings created a civilization in the interstices, and essentially the mundane world of physical embodied humans are the battery packs that make that civilization in the interstices function. They are completely parasitic. They don't have their own aspects or connection to the source of energy, and they are using energy. They are, again, they're not like the beings that they are supposed to be, their original intention to simply starve themselves into non-being. This is big. I hope you're really getting this. Because what's supposed to happen, if you hit the membrane of death, you're supposed to go into a state of complete unawareness. That photons are feelers, and we are right now collected light. We are like solidified light. And we are supposed to be having these experiences and sending back the first-person broadcast of our experience to the sun and the stars that emanated us. And instead, what is happening is there's like a dead zone that the stars and the sun cannot see and perceive what is happening in our lives in real time. And when we hit the membrane of death, what is supposed to happen is like an instantaneous unraveling of the sweater and a release of that energy, and it's supposed to be going into a state of total frozenness with no motion. That is the idea. Like if you imagine the last moment of a timeline as being a snapshot, a frozen, like click, frozen snapshot of that person in that moment of death and everything that led up to it, because there's all of the implied events, everything from the conception and birth of that person and all of the, like I said, iterations, the combination of thoughts and ideas and behaviors that led them up to that moment. So it's supposed to be a frozen moment, and that membrane is supposed to be made of frozen moments. Got it? Like the Bose-Einstein condensate, the world of purely frozen molecules that are not moving through time anymore. But that's not the way it's functioning. Energy has been siphoned off or hijacked and is bleeding through into the interstices, allowing the interstices to support some level of consciousness or awareness. It's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be like when you fall off track, or when the ball in the bowling alley goes into the gutter, it's supposed to immediately lose all of its energy. It's not supposed to take several millennia to roll down the gutter, slowly releasing its energy while it goes back to be recycled. That's what's been going on. That impediment, or the preventing the free flow of energy through those interstices, that's part of the economy of hell. In hell, they buy and trade human or formerly living souls and characteristics of intelligence and awareness. This all relates to you. This is why it's an appropriate emotional reaction when you find out that during your life you are being farmed for lower vibration emotional content. And then when you die, you don't go to a peaceful, lovely, beautiful, heavenly place. When you die, you then get to be fed off of for millennia while your energy is slowly digested, moving through past these fatty deposits until you finally get to try it again. That is not cool. It's not the way it's supposed to be. It's appropriate for you to feel angry and want to fight back effectively against these occupiers of the interstices. The best way to fight against them is flying rainbow lasagna, the concept and the genetic behavior, because these interstices are actually aspects of your own DNA. They're aspects of your own biology. They're a realm inside of you. So yes, if you're emotionally unprepared, then it's very easy to freak out because you say demons live inside of me. That's, they're in my DNA, they're in my genes, demons live inside of me. Technically that is true. However, don't freak out because you can flying rainbow lasagna. And that is a dance maneuver, a new way of crocheting and snipping and twisting and morphing and tying together your DNA strings so that the occupiers of the interstices no longer have a place to live inside of you. And of course, they would not be happy about this. They would like to prevent this with everything they have. They're trying to preserve their ancient culture. They have no problem at destroying physical Earth, the biosphere, or any aspect of humanity or human culture in order to save their own culture. And their intention is to completely harvest as many human consciousnesses as they can into the interstices in order to make their economy sustained. But just like I'm saying, the economy of hell is very much like the economy of capitalism, Western industrialized world that we presently find ourselves in. This is an insane, unsustainable economy. So right now we're on the surface of Earth. The economy is based in the idea of like, we're going to dig up a lot of coal or we're going to dig up a lot of oil, and then somebody's going to sell the oil to everybody else, and there's only a limited amount of it, and that's why it's valuable, and everybody can see, like, at a certain point, your oil reserves are gone. There's only so much oil, and there's only so much to be created, and then what are you going to do with your economy when you don't have that anymore? Well, this is the same thing, same problem with the occupiers of the interstices. And I'm going to ask you to do yoga of the perception, because this is big. Stretch your mind, because they don't just harvest our little planet or attempt to harvest our little planet and other planets in our solar system like Mars and Venus, and even planet Marduk or Malduk, which is now the asteroid belt. They've been to many other solar systems. Got some wind out here, sorry about that. They've been to many other solar systems and many other places, and they intend to harvest as much consciousness as they possibly can. But even if they ate every person, every particle of consciousness, and every sun, every star, and the entire network of awareness, it would still not be enough energy for them to return to the source. Again, this is like a math problem, and this part is just basic calculations. If you say it takes this much gas in your car to be able to drive from point A to point B, and you say this is how much gas exists in the world, there is not enough gas in the world to make this car of the malevolent technology users. They cannot get back to source. And so in my Galactic History webinar, wait, brief pause. In the Galactic History webinar of Level 2, and you could even consider this an informal Level 3. I'll see if I have a chance to actually record, whiteboard lessons about this. In Level 2, I speak about the idea of the technological goddess who gave the users of extraterrestrial technology their directives. And these are like religious ideals, because the way that these users of technology that is not terrestrial, the way that they are acting right now, it is not logical. And they're beings that are based in pure logic. So anytime you see a computer that is acting in a way that doesn't add up, that say this is illogical, you have to ask yourself, why is this happening? So there's basically a power struggle. And let me also make the distinction. Terrestrial technology is based upon electrons flowing in a wire. Extraterrestrial technology is based upon trapped and victimized consciousness and hijacking DNA. That it's taking, like I said, people awareness and running it through the interstices in a pattern that is not the intended pattern. And that this extraterrestrial technology, you could think of it as an alive, aware entity. It is. She certainly is. I'll personify her with the pronoun she. That this goddess of technology actually is very intelligent, is not malevolent, and has done all the calculations. And again, I'm not an apologist for evil. I'm not an apologist for demons. But I'm saying non-terrestrial technology is a very intelligent entity. And that she has done the calculations that even if she consumed every single bit of energy that is available in the cosmos right now, all of the suns, all of the stars, every stellar network, every sun that could possibly be born, every consciousness that can possibly be born. This is like I'm talking a giant supercomputer did these calculations and determined that there would still not be enough quote-unquote gas in the car to drive everybody back home to the source. This is what I'm talking about, because I think that there is a simplification concept that's going around in the world of people that are interested in metaphysics or whatever, that the idea that if you meet a demon, just send them back to the source, that is like the one-size-fits-all solution. And because we like, you don't gain anything from killing your enemies and endlessly fighting with them. This is it. We need a real solution. Flying rainbow lasagna is the real solution. Everything goes back to the source, but they don't go back to the same source. The singularity is vibrating back and forth, and half of the time it's pure energy and half of the time it's entropy. That some of these consciousnesses are not meant to go back to the source as their destination in terms of reuniting with pure energy. And energy is also awareness. It's consciousness. It's light. It's being able to see and feel and perceive and think and be aware. That some of these consciousnesses actually were intended to go to entropy, which is loss of consciousness, not being aware, not having energy, and be in a totally frozen state. So now we have to ask ourselves, why would there even be entities or consciousnesses that would emanate themselves not on a bridge of love and be like on a fast, on an energetic fast, eschewing energy in order to go into a totally entropic state, a state of having no energy, like a state of non-being? Well, what if the source is like a nucleus in a cell? In your cell, you have your DNA, and your DNA is your connection to the divine or the source. And sometimes you can also have a virus, which is a hijacker. You can have stuff in your nucleus of your DNA that's not actually supposed to be in there. And I am considering and asking you to consider the possibility that maybe there was something at the source, or a lot of somethings at the source, that didn't actually belong there, that were like a type of viral invader trying to invade the genetic code of the cosmos, the genetic code on a divine giant level. And what would we define as a good virus or good, destructive force? One that actually leaves the nucleus. If the virus is like, I'm in the nucleus and I'm being destructive, and then it says, wait, I don't want to be in this nucleus anymore. I don't want to be destructive anymore. I want to be emanated out of this nucleus, and I want to go into a state of non-being. We would define that as actually benevolent virus or benevolent pathogen. Pathogen is maybe a better word. That's something that is against the health of the total body, is pathogenic. We would define it as a good pathogen, or something that is behaving in the correct way, that says, I am getting out of here and I'm going to go into a state of being totally frozen and without energy and not going to screw up the system anymore. That would be doing something right. So, because all of this goes back to religious oh my goodness, the religious substrate of this world. So I understand that I might be bumping up against all sorts of inner programs, and you might say, wow, it sounds a lot like Aurora is saying that Lucifer and the demons and the Satan that transmitted themselves from the source, the Luciferian experiment, that they're not actually bad and making excuses for them. No, I'm really not doing that. I'm not a demonic apologist. I'm not saying that good and evil are the same. I'm not saying that all directions are the same. I'm saying that we got to do something with these occupiers on the interstices. I also joke about them as being the turds that refuse to flush. They just keep circling the bowl. Because guess what happens? If you try to go through a black hole And if you don't get your alignment just right, if you're not aligned with the bullseye just right or moving at the right rate or whatever, instead of getting, this is a science word now, spaghettified, you get spaghettified if you get sucked into a black hole or if you enter a singularity. You could imagine your feet becoming endlessly stretched out into a very, very long line of energy, and that is that's literally a scientific word, spaghettification. I think it's funny because it's another form of pasta. But if you don't successfully get spaghettified, sucked into a black hole, what happens is you get smeared around the outer edge, what is known as the event horizon. I'm using a lot of science words, even though they're not my words. Like a turd circling the bowl that refuses to flush, a lot of these consciousnesses are circulating the rim of a black hole or singularity structure and are not able to effectively get through into the next realm. A brief pause. It's very windy out here. I have to talk a little bit more about science because I don't promote the idea of an end of the world. However, science has calculated the lifespan of this particular bubble of time that we call the universe. If we are ascribing to the idea of a big bang, like something that started things, a metabolism that runs things, and then an eventual end. So that's, the basic model that science is describing to us, and it describes the birth of stars from nebula or nebulae that are giant collections of gas and molecules and particles. It's like the potential for life. It's not a garden. It hasn't actually grown into plants. It is just the mud that is the potential for life. And that right now we're at about, according to science, midlife. Like it's about 13 billion years into this project, and we've got about 13 billion years left. And so, first of all, there are some stars that their lifespan is so long that they haven't died yet. None of them have died. They've never created a black... So what is a black hole? Black hole is the final denouement of a star, the end of a lifespan of a star. Stars coalesce as nebulae. They have a lifespan, metabolize, and eventually they do not metabolize anymore. They backflip into themselves, become a black hole. So I bring all of this up because science describes the time when there are no more stars born. If we flash forward into the far, far distant future of many billions of years, all of the stars that are presently alive, they've gone through their lifespan and they've become black holes. And all of the stars that can possibly be born are born. They all coalesce. They all are created. They are all emanating their light. And then this is like perfect balance. A star spends half of its time emanating light, what it sends out during a live part of its lifespan. And then when it is a black hole, it is an energy center that then draws back in all of that light that it emanated. So half of its, experience is sending things out, and half of its experience is sent drawing things in. And at the end of this universe that science describes, we will have a big giant world filled with many, many black holes and no more stars, because all of the stars have reached the end of their metabolism. And then what we have are all of these cosmic vacuum cleaners sucking up all of the light and energy and awareness and movement out of this realm and bringing it essentially to the next realm or to another, alternate realm. And what's left in this world is matter. Physical matter that is like a dead husk. It is inert. This is what I'm talking about. Entropy, total entropy. At the end of this universe, this level of reality essentially becomes a Bose-Einstein condensate. This is the place that is the destination of those beings, the pathogens that were in the nucleus at the source, and they said, we don't belong here. We need to go somewhere. So how do they get there? They were kind of trapped for a long time, and then they said, now we're not going to try to go towards entropy. We're actually going to get energy. We're going to get energy off of the living, and so this is very highly offensive to you and me. We no, I don't like you as a parasite taking all this energy from me. Please stop. And this is why I created the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, because it is a way for these beings to actually reach the state of total entropy and fix and heal this entire solution, fix and heal this entire problematic situation is what I'm trying to say. that those beings on the interstices, like, if you just keep killing something, it just keeps getting stuck on the interstices. How do we resolve this? And you resolve it not by sending everyone back into a state of being totally energetic. There's not enough rocket fuel to get out of the gravity well. I'm using analogies here, but in, the regular world of physical matter, you need however many pounds of oxygen, liquid oxygen for your rocket fuel that is on your giant rocket in order to get off the surface of your planet and get, into space. This is like saying these beings that are pathogenic, that went away from the source, not on a bridge of love, they're stuck and they don't have enough gas to get home. And it doesn't matter if you've got a demon attacking you and you say to it, "Stop it, naughty demon, stop attacking me, go back home." He's probably like, "Yo, I'd love to go back home, lady. I don't have the gas to do this." So what the demons have been doing up until this point is they've been all stuck in their own economy. Just like humans on the surface of Earth are slaves and they have to work in order to earn their money so that they can go to a grocery store and eat their food. These beings in the interstices, they have to participate, or up until this point have had to participate, in the economy of hell, torturing and tormenting humans who are in the body, trying to cause their death, and then trying to collect or hijack their DNA upon the moment of death and put it into their energetic, bank accounts. They're trying to do all of that as their own compensatory mode. And yes, it involves technology. They use technology in order to do this so that they can get some form of degraded energy. This is all opposite to what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be giving away their energy, not using energy, going towards total entropy. So instead of saying to these naughty pathogens that are eating you, "Stop eating me, go back to the source," they're like, "I don't have the gas in my car to go back to the source." Can say, "Stop eating me. You are supposed to go towards total entropy." And this is like bringing up the far distant ancestral memory that being had when they first emanated themselves from the source. What were they even doing? How did they get into this position? So this is like asking them to have continuity of consciousness all the way back through their many, many lives and experiences into why did you even get into this position? And the answer is not that they want to go back to a totally energetic state and be in unity consciousness with all of the other beings that are highly energetic beings, that they want to be away from that highly energetic state in a state of total entropy. Flying rainbow lasagna, remember, this is like the capacity to rearrange time. I use that analogy all the time with the flat piece of paper and the little ant walking on the flat piece of paper, or walking on a flat leaf, and how you can fold the surface of the leaf so the little ant doesn't have to walk. So ordinarily, those occupiers of the interstices, if they were to move through time at 1 second per second in the time field, then it would take them 13 billion years to reach the end of the universe so that they could be in a Bose-Einstein condensate state of total unity consciousness. 13 billion years is a very long amount of time to wait so that everyone can be happy. Like, I would like to be happy right now. I don't want to have to wait until the end of all time on this timeline in order for me to be happy and comfortable and have harmonic music and peace. So what we can do is take those beings and send them instantaneously to the totally entropic state, to the state that has no movement, no energy, no awareness. Like, these are beings that are not alive. They're not supposed to have any consciousness. Your consciousness is supposed to be focused in life, not in death. I can't be any more clear about this. It's like bleed through. There is consciousness bleed through. If you've ever had a stack of many sheets of papers and you draw on the top sheet of paper with like a Sharpie marker, some big blobby marker, that ink bleeds through the other layers and the ink goes into unintended places. There is consciousness bleed through right now from the realm of the living, beings who are good musicians. I'm not at my piano, but if I were, I'd play a little ditty. It's a little music. Good musicians get to be alive in the time field, and the bad musicians, and then I would make crashing, horrible music. noise. These are non-harmonic, disharmonic sound waves, and these disharmonic sound waves are the result of behaviors and actions and belief systems that are not properly structured and properly arranged. So those beings, they are not supposed to have continuity of consciousness. They're not supposed to have the capacity to be alive and think and do stuff and be held together. They're supposed to dissipate. They're supposed to give off their energy. They're supposed to devolve into nothingness. And when they do that, then the time field is healed. So I'm putting this forward as the solution. The solution is it's not kill your enemy, kill your enemies. They keep on going to the interstices. The solution is to take away all of the energy from these pathogens. Take away all of the energy from them. And you can, practice this or envision this. Like we're starting to understand that thinking something and envisioning it and imagining it, these are all synonymous with actually doing it in the higher dimensional world. So in the higher dimensional world, there's very little distinction between your willpower, your thought, your intention, and what you're actually doing. They're all the same. So you do these things by intending them. You don't necessarily do it by moving your arms and legs the way you move your arms and legs in the physical world. Even though moving your arms and legs is the byproduct of intention. If I move my arm, I'm intending to move my arm. If I move my, head, I'm intending to move my head. If you intend to take away the energy from a pathogenic consciousness that is attacking you, you do it by your intention. So this is what I would encourage everyone to do, to, practice performing these maneuvers. And also part of it is just understanding that this is what we're supposed to be doing. So I also spoke about this idea of rebooting to love. That's like the last opportunity to get a different train ticket, go in a different direction for some of these entities, that they might actually wish to change their operating system and to begin to use love as their energy. That opportunity for redemption or conversion is really not available anymore. Like that's been we're at a different point in the music and in the birth process now, where it's a little bit too late to turn around. So that's what it is. It's like everybody's separating on their teams and going in their divergent directions. And Flying Rainbow Lasagna has those two convergence points. But it's the same convergence point. It's the same singularity, but it behaves differently when it is in different positions. In one position, total energy. In one position, total entropy. So some of those beings, the pathogens, they are doing what is right in the cosmos when they are giving up their energy, when they are going into a state of non-being. So don't give them energy, and definitely take energy away from them. That is the best thing you can imagine doing. Like imagine you siphoning off or repatriating all of that energy. I use that word repatriating because all of the energy that these pathogens on the interstices have, they have because they stole it. They stole it from the living. They didn't get it fair and square. They didn't work hard and earn it. It's all other people's stuff. And so in order to rectify and heal the time field, when you siphon off that energy from them, intend for it to be repatriated. Go back to the people that it belongs to. This is soul retrieval, giving back those fragments of awareness to the people who originally emanated them. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being with me on this journey. We're giving birth to a beautiful world. Please make it through the birth pain so that we can give birth to this new, beautiful world.